Kevin, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed our last time together. I am a professor of philosophy and religion at Asbury Theological Seminary, that's in Kentucky. And I've taught various places. I lived in England for 12 years. I didn't know if you knew that about me, Tom. I taught usually philosophy of religion, moral philosophy. Those are kind of my two areas that I do most of my teaching, research, and writing on. And I've been doing that. Yeah, kind of one of those professional students through my mid-30s, and then I've been teaching since then. Yeah.
Cool. So tell me more about Christian faith and moral virtue. How do those things align?
Well, right. So the article, I think I sent you an article or a book chapter, and it was aimed at addressing a particular kind of objection. And it's an objection that I fear has been perpetuated by some Christians. If you turn on the television, you might also get this feeling that Christianity holds to this. But in fact, the traditional Christian view does not hold to this. That is, the objection doesn't work against traditional Christianity as I understand it. But the objection is a good one. And the objection goes something like this. How can it be that for Christians, you could live a life of virtue, things we all recognize as virtuous, reach out to the poor, help those in need, all these kinds of things, but not have faith? But then the scoundrel who simply has faith, especially if their faith is understood, they believe the right stuff, they live, their horrible lives, or at least not very virtuous, but they're going to be in heaven. And the virtuous person won't be in heaven, even though this virtuous person clearly has a lot more virtue lived out in this life. So so here's the objection then. If Christianity holds that, the scoundrel who just believes the right thing, on the deathbed, believes the right thing or something like that, then they're in heaven. And the hardworking, virtuous person who dedicates their lives to, say, the poor or some environmental cause or something like that, but they just simply find themselves not believing, they're not destined for full and final reconciliation with God. If that's what Christianity espouses, then that's a rather poor source of moral instruction. That's the objection. And I feel the force of that. And if Christianity did commit me to something like that, I would agree with that critique. But what I want to say is that my understanding of Christian faith, at least, and I think this is more of a historic one, is not open to that objection. The objection rests on a false assumption about the nature of faith and about the nature of heaven. So that's in a nutshell what the chapter I sent you was attempting to address. So we could talk about either one or both of those. We talked a bit last time about the nature of faith. We talk about that or the nature of heaven, but I'm going to say that objection rests on faulty assumptions about the nature of faith, about the nature of heaven, even though these faulty assumptions I recognize have been perpetuated in some Christian circles. And if you turn on a TV and watch an evangelist, you might have this kind of faulty assumption only galvanized in your mind.
Yeah, so could you tell me why is it a false assumption? Because that seems to be a pretty strong implication about the Bible, is that the only way to go to heaven is through Jesus, and if you don't believe in Jesus, you can't go to heaven regardless of acts or whatever.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the Bible, when the Bible commends us to believe in Jesus, I can't remember if we talked about this last time, Tom, but it is a mistake to equate the modern English understanding of belief as in intellectually assent to equate that with the biblical injunction to put your faith in Jesus. So we could talk about this for a while if you want, about my reasons for thinking the Bible actually doesn't say you must believe as an intellectually assent to the name Jesus. And in fact, Jesus specifically says, there's many people who will say to me on that day, like the day of judgment, Lord, did we not do all these things in your name? Like they believe the right stuff. And Jesus says, I will have to say to them, I never knew you. So you can believe the right thing, but the important point is to cling to trust in and commit yourself to what the name of the Jesus stands for. That is the principles of his kingdom, is the way I would spell that out.
Well, I don't think that like people who claim to believe falsely. I mean, that would be. I don't think that would be contradictory to the idea that you need to like actually believe the proposition that Jesus is Lord or whatever. Those things seem to be in conjunction, not in conflict.
Right. So no, right. So I hear that. Right. So if you're asking so I don't know if you're kind of getting at this, maybe you are. What about the person who just doesn't believe the things requisite for robust Christian faith? So even if faith is belief and all this other stuff, it still includes belief. Was that kind of what
Yeah.
you're? Yeah. Well, what I'll say a couple things. One, before the year, as far as I can see, in the 1500s, it was the working assumption among Christian writers, people like Aquinas, whoever else you want to pick out, that those who were outside the Christian church were willfully outside the church. That is the category of non-culpable non-belief. Like, I don't believe it because, like, I never heard it, for example. That wasn't even a category. So that's kind of the first thing I'll say. Second, the Christian tradition does have a long history of talking in terms of implicit faith. That is, according to Christian teaching, any spark we have of conscience or loving desire or anything that's good is a communication from God. It's a spark of the Holy Spirit. That's just Christian teaching. When I respond to that, I am responding to the Spirit of Christ, even though I don't recognize it as the Spirit of Christ. So the tradition has a long history of talking about implicit faith in Jesus. That is, making the kinds of decisions in which we're actually aligning ourselves with what Jesus is doing, even though we're not realizing intellectually that's what we're doing. And so then there's a question, would there be scope then after one's earthly life, when one sees the truth about Jesus, if this is indeed the truth, one wouldn't have to kind of decide whether to follow him. One would naturally already have the disposition to follow Jesus through all these individual decisions they've made in their earthly lives, cultivating these kinds of virtues. But the tradition has a long history of talking about implicit faith.
Well, I mean,
So if you're
like I could agree with the morals of Jesus, but not care about Jesus. Like I think the morals are important. Jesus has zero value at all. Like that seems perfectly rational.
right, so what I would say to that, I don't think it's perfectly rational when you do a deep dive into the nature of heaven, like what's so good about it, which for me is just, and this is the Christian tradition as well speaking, perfected relationships. When you do a deep dive into how perfected relationships work, what keeps us from perfected relationships, then all of a sudden Jesus doesn't, in my view, doesn't become irrelevant. It becomes absolutely necessary. Jesus or someone just like or very much like Jesus. So this is where that kind of the second prong of those faulty assumptions, what's so great about heaven, comes in.
Why does Jesus matter here? Because I'm not following why Jesus matters here.
Right, to like living a moral life or to achieving perfected relationships.
Both. Like I'm not seeing
Right.
like if I'm trying to understand what a perfectly virtuous life would be,
Yeah.
Jesus plays no role in this. Like
Okay.
morality
So
is assisting people, trying to help
gotcha.
people, whatever. Like any
Okay.
individual is just completely irrelevant.
Okay. Right. Okay. So I got that. So I've talked to people about kind of the sentiment, and you may share this, Tom. It's like, well, if I were to become a Christian, I don't know that my like behavior would change any, because like I'm already committed to, XYZ. I'm already committed to, helping people. I'm already committed to policies that produce the common good, that kind of thing. So a virtue, of course, the only way to identify a virtue is to identify an ideal life. So you got to start with the ideal life, in my strong view. And people like Alistair McIntyre have written about stuff like this. And then the virtues help get you to that ideal life. But without a picture of the ideal life, you don't really know what is a virtue or not, right? So would you agree with that kind of sentiment? That first you got to identify, the kind of life we're going to help others lead, and maybe the ideal life for ourselves, and then the virtues are those things, those dispositions, those characteristics that help you get there.
Sure, in general.
Okay, so so my strong view as a Christian would be that the ideal, and this is for me the Christian view of heaven, the ideal would be perfected relationships, and by that I mean broadly relationships where we are completely known by others and completely loved, and reciprocally we know others fully and we love them. And by love I mean benevolence, making the other person's interests my own. I make their interest my own, they make my interest their own. So that kind of, and the word that I kind of land on is the best word I know. It's not a magical word, but this idea of connecting, the connecting deeply in loving relationships for me is the ideal. Okay. So would you, I mean, we could talk about that, but I don't know if you'd kind of be on board with that or not at this point.
Probably not, because I think there's lots of people who don't care about connection. Like, connection is a thing people can value and lots of people value, but it's not like the essence of morality. Like, I don't think.
Well, forget about morality just for a sec. The good life.
Right. That's what I mean. So, like, morality, I
Okay,
think,
okay.
is any involuntary imposition of will. So it's the maximization of whatever you think is the most important thing, which for many people could be playing video games, watching anime, and have nothing to do with relationships. Relationships are
Yeah,
a thing people can value.
right. So I think this might be a really interesting point, Tom, where we would disagree. So I am become more and more convinced that um, those other things ultimately have diminishing returns. Like hobbies I do by myself in the long term have diminishing returns unless I'm able to share them with others. So there's a proverb. Um, it's Proverbs 17:1, but it says, "Better a dry crust of bread in peace than a feast amid strife." And what the point of that is meant to be that any like beautiful sunset or comic movie that's great or video game that I love that's really cool graphics or whatever, over time, if my relationships are more and more disordered and out of sync and I'm at animosity or I'm feeling alienated or alone, those things are just not going to be enjoyable. But if I'm in deep connection of loving others and being loved by others, then we could have just a terrible spaghetti dinner or something like that, and it'll be the best meal in the world because
Well,
we're
that's
just in
empirically
great
false.
fellowship.
Like, we know
See,
for a
I
fact.
don't
Well,
I
no,
don't
this is
think
this
I
is
don't
this
think
isn't
so.
really up for debate. This is proven false. We know some people don't care about relationships. It's like we know that psychologically it's a fact of nature. Some people don't care about relationships, and so what makes a video
Well,
game enjoyable for them is not involving other people. That's why there's
right,
single player video games. Like, the whole point of
right.
these games is there are no other people there to bother you.
Do
And
you do you think that in the long term, like just indefinitely, like hundreds of years, that genuinely would be like the good life for them? Like
yes,
they're alienated from others.
yes.
Well, okay,
Like,
so
this is the
we're
thing.
just
This is a fact of autism, is that people who have autism have a special interest, and that special interest is the most important thing in the world to them, and
Mhm,
literally nothing else matters. So
mhm,
some people could be like just into trains, as long as they have their train
mhm,
collection and working with trains. Literally nothing else in the world matters to them, and they are perfectly happy.
mhm.
So
Well,
human action is just
yeah,
completely.
the perfectly happy bit. We might have to. That might be the key issue for us, Tom. I think it's a great point that you're that you're raising, by the way. And I'm not trying to like say no, they're really unhappy. I'm not trying to say that at all. Um, so and there's a certain. I mean, there's a certain. I don't want to call it level, but maybe I'll just talk in terms of level of happiness that say, oh, I'm not comparing an autistic person to a dog. That's not the point. But say dogs can have, my dog can have, that kind of thing. There's a certain kind of connecting and flourishing, though, that I think humans can have as, I would say, partial ultimate causes of their own actions, that we can connect creatively. Like I can add something as a person creatively to this enterprise, and you can as well. And I think ultimately what I'm going to say, and this is where my Christian kind of, because I believe all this stuff is true, this would impact kind of what I would say about an autistic person. Again, I think it's a great example to raise. I would still say that there's something about our highest flourishing as a kind of creature, a human creature, that is going to lead into relationships. And I don't know exactly what's going on with an autistic person, I think I would say that there is a kind of long-term flourishing that I would be committed to saying is available to all people. It may be that certain, and I just cannot speak intelligently about exactly what's going on in the brain of an autistic person and how that might be changed or something like that, or healed, if that's the right word. And I don't want to be, not trying to be like paternalistic and say they need to be healed or something like that, but maybe we're just not going to agree on that. So I kind of
this is an empirical question. We know for a fact neurologically,
but you don't know the level. But you don't know the level
no,
of
no, we know
long-term.
all of that. We can any measurable fact. We can say it does this make people happy and value, and say there's some people who don't care about that, and that they get no value out of that. Human relationships cause them nothing but stress. They want to live in the forest and be alone because they don't like human relationships. It adds no value to life whatsoever, and we can measure the level of stress. Like we know for a fact they
Yeah,
don't gain value out of these things.
the particular relationships they have.
No, they just don't like relationships. They do not value human interaction. It's
So
not, they don't care about any human relationship. They don't want any of it.
so it seems like a good model or a good test of this would have to be, they would have to be participating in relationships of genuine, like where I've made your interest my own, you've made mine, reciprocally knowing and loving one another, and they experience that, and they just say, yeah, I experienced it. I'd rather just
Yes.
video. Okay.
That's
I don't know
what
how
they
you do exactly a test like that. Like to heal all the relationships. No, you can't say that they've done that, Tom. Come on.
No, we've literally.
I've never been in that kind of a relationship. I mean, I've had great relationships in life, but nothing like perfected like that.
No, we've done this. This is literally a thing. We know people don't value relationships in the way that you're stating, but
right, they may not. Okay, they may not value them, but look, I may not value things like forgiveness because I want to hold on to my grudge, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to flourish in the long term by holding on to it.
No, that's exactly what it means.
No, it doesn't.
So it's like
so you have a view of,
is about value and what you find valuable in life. I mean, if you find
that can't be wrong. That can't be right, Tom. That can't be right. That's
you're applying your own biases and you're not understanding other people's perspectives, and that's all it is. Like we know people have the greatest amount of flourishing with no human interaction. Human interaction does not add amount flourishing to anybody necessarily. There's no connection whatsoever.
You mean the greatest amount for them right now?
No,
given their relationship
forever.
And we know that empirically.
Yes,
we know that empirically.
All of the empirical data shows that because relationships.
Where's the eternal test? Where's this?
Relationships are literally no different than chocolate or video games. Some people like them, some people don't. There's no added amount of flourishing from one than the other. It's just this is what helps some people. This is what helps some other people.
Okay. We're gonna this is well, that's good to identify. I think we're just gonna really strongly disagree about that, Tom. So I honestly respect what you're saying, and I think some of your examples are really good. Could I just probe one kind of question on this? Do you think that the key to someone's well-being is their current valuing, their current desires, and the current things that they value? That like a desire satisfaction account of well-being is what I'm asking. Like the things that they desire, the things that they most value, when they get those, that is the good life for them. It seems to be the assumption line behind, at least what I hear you say.
No, so like well-being is past tense. It's like, have you gotten the things that you value and you're in a healthy state of mind? So it's not a present tense thing. And so well-being would be, or the greatest well-being would be something like a world that maximizes your ability to achieve the things that you value.
But you value kind of, so what do you make of phrases like, be careful what you wish for, it's not all cracked up what it was cracked up to be, these kinds of things? Or would you say, well, with perfect information, what I would value? So most desires.
The problem with like those statements is that they infer that there's some unknown consequence that you didn't ask for. So like if I wish for, let's say 100 pounds of gold, and it is, and there's some genie who grants my wish, but he puts it directly above my head. So it just squishes me. Like clearly that's not what I wished for.
Well, but that's not, but the expression is be careful what you wish for. Like I wanted this, like I wanted to date the cheerleader or whatever like that. And then I got to date her and it's just a nightmare, that kind of thing.
Well, no, that's the
I
exact
mean, it's
kind
a
of thing
bit.
I'm talking about. So,
Oh, okay.
like,
Okay.
there's only a consequence if you're not like in control of the world. So like if I say I want to eat 1,000 cheeseburgers and then you get really fat. Well, the problem is the fatness, not the cheeseburgers. If you wanted to eat cheeseburgers, you wanted some kind of sense gratification from eating the food and it tasted good and you got that. But there's this unknown consequence that you didn't want. That's an entailment of the world that isn't something you consented to. So there's the only reason that you have to be careful what you wish for is because the way the world works has rules and limitations to it that you didn't consent to. And so when you wish for one thing, these entailments that are tied into it related to a world that you didn't want are also coming with it. And so it has nothing to do with the way the world should be. That's simply a pragmatic limitation of the bad way this world is. So
So
there
I
would
don't.
be there would be no be careful what you wish for if there was actually a perfectly well-being statist world.
So I don't know about that. So you don't think we can ever be in error about what is genuinely going to make us happy, not because of information about the world, but just what will make us happy? Like I thought I'd be happy if I told, if I really had this, told my mother-in-law this or that, and I did it, and it just made me feel worse, or it made the
What
made the relationship even worse, or things like that.
Well, I don't think happiness and well-being are the same thing. Like, for example, I can want to play a very difficult video game and it's going to make me very unhappy. It's going to add a lot of stress because it's a very difficult video game, but that's
Mhm,
the point. So
mhm.
well-being isn't the ability to get happiness or know everything with 100% certainty. It's the ability to achieve the things you value, which may be to go through the struggle of a video game and to play something
What
difficult to
what
do.
what right. What about so would you allow that some things like the happy surprises, like the old, I mean, this is an adage, like you get taken kicking and screaming like at Christmas time or something like that when you're little, and you get taken to the retirement home. You're like, oh, why do we have to go there? But then you go and it's like you see the faces brighten up, and then the kid leaves saying, like that was really, really good. Would you allow, you're happy with that too, aren't you? I mean,
No, if
would
you're an
you,
adult, it's immoral to force someone to go to some place they don't consent to.
do you have children, Tom? I'm not trying to be
No,
smart.
that's
Okay.
irrelevant. So I'm saying adults, forcing adults to do
Okay.
things they don't consent to. It's immoral to force an adult to do something they don't consent to.
Well, this is an interesting question, Tom. This is one of the um, this is one of the for me issues that why we need Jesus. Kind of circling back to this, to live into perfected relationships. One, I think, in even the best kinds of relationships marked by, like, I want this person to do well, like I'm not wishing ill of them, I love them and they love me, is this conflict in life between wanting to further their interests as I think best or as they think best. And this is something that, with children, you got all the time. And frankly, I don't know if I mean, you don't have to share about your parents. I'm not asking you to share, but I'll just quickly share. Um, my experience is very similar to lots of people my age who've had parents or in-laws age and with memory issues. And then there's discussions about, can you live at home anymore by yourself? Can you drive anymore? And so they, this tension between they want to be, so they want me to pursue their interest as they see their interests best. But I can only pursue their interests as I think best. And I take into consideration what they value and how it's going to affect them when I just kind of ramrod it or make them do something, to put it crudely. But this is like a under I mean, this is like under the surface, I would say, of all good loving relationships. Even in a marriage, this like happens in good friendships all the time.
Or I'm
I
not
need to
following. So
well I
just
need
just just to clarify here, so like it seems
to
like what you're saying is you don't have enough money to support them in the way that makes them happy. Therefore,
No, it's not that.
because
No, it's not that. It's what they want, autonomy, but I don't feel it's best for them because they could fall, they could hurt
because right,
themselves.
right. So there's some natural way the world is that will infringe on them that they don't consent to, that, and because there's this natural way the world is that they don't have any control over, you're going to impose some other restriction on them to protect them to that natural way the world is. Now, if you get rid of that natural way the world is, say they just have eternal youth and they don't have to worry about falling and breaking their bones. Now, would you force them to be in an old folks home, or would you
You mean
say, okay, yeah,
if I could heal their dementia or
yeah, yeah,
give
yeah,
them a pill
all
that'll
of the
heal the
natural
dementia?
limitations. So the
Well,
dementia,
sure.
right? So now you'd never ever force them to do something that you want over what they want, because there aren't these
Well,
natural limitations.
even still, and it wouldn't be. I mean, unless you just want to have an extremely broad category of the world. This happens all the time in friendships, doesn't it? Or colleagues, or a marriage, where you say you need to apologize to that person. I mean, you were in the wrong, and your friend says, no, I don't need. They owe me an apology, and so they want you to
Okay.
support them, right? It kind of like they want loyalty from you. And you're like, well, I understand loyalty. That is important. But there's also a point where I don't think this is doing you any favors if I just tell you
Well,
what you want to
you
hear.
can't force them to apologize. That's not, who cares about that? I'm talking about when you're trying to make a decision to force someone else to live in an old folks home or whatever. That's always going to be immoral. That's always a bad decision. The only reason it's justified is because if you don't do it, there's some worse consequence or something. But if you get rid of that worse consequence, it's never a moral thing to do to force someone into an old folks home. The moral thing to do is to allow them to decide for themselves what they think is the most best way to live.
Okay.
And
Well, I
so,
mean, okay. What if I think it's making, what if I am convinced, like the friend, I think the friend is really becoming a self-destructive, self-centered egomaniac, because he's just, everyone else is wrong and he's never wrong. And he wants loyalty from me. And there's a value in loyalty, but also I think that, you need to go, swallow your pride and admit you're not perfect and you owe this person an apology. But couldn't I extend that to my mother or mother-in-law and say, well, maybe it's not
well, no,
dementia, but
your expectations and forcing them to do things are different. So they can just say no, and you can say, okay, I don't agree with that, and you can walk away, and that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But
well, I
there's a
mean,
difference between that
there
and,
might, right, there might be something wrong with that though, Tom. If they're insulted, if they feel I'm betraying them, if I feel
that
I'm
doesn't
not,
matter.
if I feel I'm, well, it
So like
matters to the
every
relationship.
individual has a right to determine their own autonomy. And so the fact that you disagree, there's no like disagreeing or not
Okay.
liking one another, that's perfectly fine. There's no immorality or damage to well-being there. And so if someone wants to be an asshole or whatever and they lose relationships because of that, that's perfectly fine. They have every right to experience that and to grow from that. And if they want to change and have more fulfilling relationships, they can choose to do that. But it's up to them. Like, there's nothing wrong with them saying, now I'm going to continue to be an asshole because I like being an asshole. Like, they have every right to make that decision.
Well, they may have a right, but I don't. But if you believe they're harming themselves, wouldn't the loving thing be to help them not do it? I'm not talking about
No,
like putting them in a straitjacket. What do you mean, no? You wouldn't
because
go to your
their
friend
better
again?
selves could be being the asshole. They could really value being the asshole. They could really value, say,
But
this is who I am as a person. This is what I like to be. This is who I really value, or the kind of life I really value. And so trying to force them to change to be more like what you think is socially acceptable would be immoral. You are forcing them to have less well-being because you're trying to
no,
make them
no, well,
accommodate
no, no,
your
no,
values.
well, I see. I wouldn't have the working assumption that their well-being is always a matter of them achieving their current desires.
Right. Well, you're saying their well-being is based off of what you presuppose well-being is,
No,
which
they
is
have
wrong.
they have a well-being irrespective of what I think about it. But I
Right.
just think that I have greater insight into it than they do. But this happens all the time in life. I think I have greater insight than my, mother with dementia, or I think I have greater insight than my child or my friend on some
Right, but you
issue.
keep
People
listing people who
disagree.
have biological limitations. And you have a consenting adult who has no dementia, who's like, no, I like being an asshole. They're right about their well-being. You're wrong. You are wrong about their well-being.
No,
You are
I don't.
objectively wrong about their well-being. And we know this. We know this. This has
No,
been
no, no.
proven. This has been absolutely 100% proven in psychology and neurology and cognitive sciences, the consensus in every single academic field. People are comfortable with being who they are, and they get to decide what makes them comfortable. You don't. People know themselves better than you do. You will never, ever, ever be more right about someone else's well-being if they're a consenting adult than they are. They get to make the choice. What you could be more right about is the consequences of what happens in the natural world. So like if you're a heroin addict or whatever, and you know heroin's going to destroy your body, like, yeah, you're going to be more right about that. But whether or not someone wants to do heroin, if there were no consequences in the world, they would be right that heroin would make them, give them the greatest well-being. The only thing you can be right about is unconsented natural consequences. But every single individual is the most right as long as they're consenting adults and don't have any like mental damage.
So I would just have a different view about the nature of well-being than that. So I would have a more of a perfectionist account of well-being, and it sounds like you'd have more of a desire satisfaction account of well-being.
Well, what is yours based on? Because mine's based on actual science, things that we can demonstrate are real and not imaginary.
No, I don't know how you would construe an empirical test to measure someone's potential well-being over the long term.
We literally.
I mean, you say
like
no,
we do happiness studies, we do well-being studies.
So it makes them
life studies.
So it makes the heroin addict happier in the moment, right? So you're going to tell me that their well-being is, if they decide to be just self-destructive.
No. So the heroin addict there's a physical damage to the body. That's a separate example. So we have studies in science that measure well-being. We know what happens to well-being. Like one of the ones that I can think of is the money study that shows that happiness is correlated to the amount of money you have up to about $50,000. And once you go above $50,000, the amount of happiness correlated to the amount of money decreases relative to like the more money you have. So we know how much money it takes to gain some certain level of well-being. It's about $50,000 a year. And once you go above that, it's diminishing returns. And we can do this for essentially everything. We know what makes people happy. We know what gives people well-being.
But just really quickly to interrupt, I'm sorry, but there's huge contentions about how to model that, like all the factors that should or shouldn't go into those models.
Right, I mean, but none of them support your position. But they all support each. None of them support your position. 0% of them support your position. Some people like this, and they get to choose. Some people like to be in a forest on their own with no social value, and that is the morally correct well-being decision for them. And we know it is because we can then measure their brain chemistry. We can show the difference between a highly stressed person and a non-stressed person,
right?
And show the damage to the brain, and show they are have significantly more well-being being alone in the forest than being with anyone.
In that moment, given what they're doing and given the state of their other relationships. Okay.
No. Objectively, for their entire life, this is the only rational conclusion. Saying that, I can imagine something differently when maybe their well-being is different is just fairy tale land.
It's not fairy tale.
It is literally fairy tale land. We know for a fact, this is undeniable that some people don't like being around other people under any context ever. Never, ever, ever, under any reason. They do not like being around other people. They like being alone. And that is perfectly healthy for them. It is more healthy for them. And if you force them to be around other people, you're causing them suffering. It is never beneficial for their well-being. It doesn't matter what the person is like.
So like they go to prison and they get locked in solitary confinement, and it's actually a blessing for them.
So like, no, solitary confinement is torture because it's a prison. If they could go to the forest and live on their own and not be around other people, that's fine. Yes, being locked in a prison cell, which they don't consent to, is not the same as really consenting to go into the forest and being alone.
Okay. Well, right. Okay. So maybe we should just confine it to what it seems to me then the vast majority of people in this world. I don't know if you'd be willing to concede that, where loving relationships, their well-being really does in the long term ultimately hinge on that, or would you not be willing to concede that? I guess what I'm thinking
there are definitely tendencies of the vast majority of people find certain things giving them well-being more than others. That's true. But I mean, when I'm thinking about well-being, I'm thinking about literally for every individual person who's ever lived, kind of a thing. Because if I want a perfect well-being, which is like comparing it to heaven or whatever, then it would be perfect for everyone, not just perfect for the majority. But yes, I agree that the majority want loving relationships.
Right. So the outliers, I mean, and you're gonna say, why should I think this? The outliers, I think I just set aside. I don't want to just say something like, well, there's a certain kind of human nature that everyone is going to flourish in the long term through these relationships. So that was great, Tom. I'm not going to try to argue that. So if we could just take the vast majority, at least, if you're comfortable with this,
sure,
that if all the relationships are flourishing wonderfully, it's hard to imagine someone's life not going well for them. Would you broadly agree with that? Like, they don't have a
No.
lot of money, but I mean, there's certain conditions, like if I've got a roaring toothache, that kind of thing. But
Well, no, forget all physical pain. Like most people like contention. They prefer contentious relationships than agreeable relationships. They like video games. People play video games that are competitive more than cooperative. Uh, People like the Kardashians because they get into drama and fights. People don't like perfectly agreeable. Like,
yeah,
wait,
right.
not finished yet. Not finished yet. So
Okay, sorry.
we know from also studies that if they're perfectly agreeable relationships, people don't continue them as much. People like disagreement and contention and combativeness and having ups and downs in relationships. They don't like perfectly stable, perfectly healthy relationships. Those are not fun.
So like stories where you got to overcome something and there's bad stuff
Yes.
happened to them, and like
Yes.
it's great. I guess this movie and everything was wonderful, right?
Yeah.
So even if there's right, so part of that could be like the resolution of things, but you would say even when there's no resolution, people like that. So
Ups and downs. Like it's got ups and downs. So
okay.
it's not like no final solutions. No bad
Right.
final solutions. But
Right.
there's going to be ups and downs where you have high points and low points, and that's what people like the most.
Yeah. So so I'm not sure if you're going to agree with this. So I just would feel very strongly that I understand the competitiveness, but let me just give you two kinds of attitudes that for me really work against perfected relationships of mutually loving and making the other person's well-being their own, which for me is again going to be like the vision of the good life for I won't say all people, but for the majority of people. I think it will be all people ultimately, but we'll leave that aside for most people. So here's two things that I have tried to work against, and with limited success, and I still struggle. And maybe you're going to come away with this, say, Kevin, you shouldn't struggle about these things because they're not so bad. But let me just give you two things that I think work really against perfected relationships that I've found in my own life that I'm not happy about, that I'm trying to get rid of. Okay, just see if you agree that these are two kinds of viciousness.
What are they? What are the two?
Okay, one, Schadenfreude.
I mean, is that like a kind of cookie?
Well, it's a moist coconut based. No, the glee or the joy at seeing another person's downfall or seeing them suffer.
What's wrong with that?
What's going to be my question? I mean, Schopenhauer said that was the most obvious like case of a really evil soul. I'm paraphrasing, but like for him, that's like the heart of the viciousness that you could take delight in.
I find that's one of the most fun things in the world. So like if me and one of my friends are playing volleyball, I play volleyball like every day, and he's really good. He's a good player, and I just stuff him in the face, just completely just smash him. It is the funniest thing ever. Everyone laughs because I'm not that good. He's phenomenal, and I just completely just crushed him on one of the highest points or challenges of volleyball, and we just all point and laugh and make fun of him.
Right.
It is the greatest thing ever.
Right. So laughing with someone, even at someone's like, like you step, like you fall off the boat in the lake and you're all laughing with me. But that's a different than laughing at me, of course. And you might say, there's a mixture.
At him because he made a mistake. So like if someone's really good and they make a mistake and they're like super overconfident and you laugh at them, it's like, haha, you suck. Owned noob.
Yeah.
You suck. Like that is so much fun. Everyone loves that. That's like one of the most fun things to do in a video game is to trounce on the noobs or the people who are really overconfident.
I hear that, and I did sports growing up, and I completely understand that kind of a giggle, that kind of a raucous thing when something bad. But I guess I'm thinking more of terms of something that's genuinely like their downfall, like where they are harmed and they are hurt and they are brought down and something really doesn't go well for them. Something that they, really, it's a hurtful thing to them. And then we take delight in the
same emotion, just to a different extent. So I think that if we had a world where no one could literally die or be harmed, then that same emotion would just be applied to all of these kind of funny concepts of like volleyball or whatever. And it's the exact same emotion. So the only problem there is, again, the world causing people harm, which shouldn't happen in the first place.
Well, so I took your example to be kind of the ups and downs of volleyball and sport. It's kind of like we're not ever going to make a mistake, and if you can't laugh at yourself, it's part of their. Hopefully, in retrospect, they would look back and say, "Well, that was part of the ups and downs of an overall good experience." But I'm thinking Schadenfreude is kind of like something, something genuinely bad happens, and we're glad to see it. We're glad to see them make a fool of themselves and get really genuinely embarrassed.
Well, again,
really
genuinely
whatever.
bad is only a subjective thing to the world. So let's say someone, I don't know, gets run over by a drunk driver or something. Now, in our world where we live, that's very bad because you only get one life essentially. And so their life is destroyed by this. But in a video game, you get run over by a drunk driver. It's hilarious because we're both competing for some like to capture
Right.
the flag, and some random person just comes and smashes you, and you're like, ha, that's funny. I win. And so all of those, even though that's the exact same emotion of being glad for someone's downfall, the only difference is the permanence of the consequence relative to the world. And so the problem there isn't
Well,
the emotion. It's not that we're happy to see someone being destroyed is a bad thing. It's that someone being destroyed is a bad thing. And our
well,
joy towards that is completely independent.
yeah, well, it is a bad thing, but I think most moral philosophers would say it is also a bad thing, and it's debate about why it's a bad thing. But there's been widespread agreement, which you may not agree with, Tom, but widespread agreement that Schadenfreude is really a very destructive thing. Now, what's one thing, people playing games, but we're talking about the more serious, like when someone genuinely reflects and
How is
it's
it
hurtful.
destructive?
Well,
How
that's
is it
kind of
destructive to have that
that's kind of
feeling?
the interesting question. My take would be that it undermines your ability to participate in the kinds of relationships that ultimately long term will make you flourish, like these where we make other people's interests our own. I mean, it's fun in the moment. Yeah, but it's ultimately
Well,
self destructive. Just
no,
like
like I
it's
get
fun to.
that, but
I
that doesn't
mean,
make sense because you can have that for like an out group, but still have completely meaningful relationships for an in group. That happens all the time.
Well, yeah, I think ultimately the seeds of the destruction, like when we rally, if our friendship and our joy is based on some other person's suffering, ultimately what I've communicated to you is that if there ever comes a time when I can get joy out of your suffering, I mean, I'm not above such things.
Well,
I
that's
mean,
false. We know in group how in groups and out groups work.
it's not, well, I
There
look,
are people who think the downfall of an opposing football team is really, really funny, but the downfall of someone they know isn't funny. They're really sad by it. So when your family member breaks their leg, they're very sad. But if your enemy family breaks a leg, it's hilarious. The fact that because you feel one way towards an opposing group doesn't lead to this slippery slope fallacy that you're now only gonna that is going to apply to
no,
your in group too.
No, I think, well, I don't know. I think the seeds of it are planted. I think you find this in business ethics all the time. Like when we're in business together, like one of the things in business ethics that, like this was the thing about Enron. They're like glad when forest fires are going in California. They're like, yeah, it sucks for them, but it's going to be great for us. But what that communicates to, like in an office, is that, well, if there ever comes a time when, I can get ahead and you go down, then I've got no qualms of doing it. So Aristotle talks about this a lot, Tom, this kind of a city state, like a flourishing city state for him is a partnership for living well, but that involves everyone making each other's interests their own so that you get this, what he called a we self. Like, I'm totally on board with that. And you may not be, like, you may say you can split into groups, but I think that's temporary. Like the seeds of self-destruction are planted. I mean, not like for 10 years, but like long term, hundreds of years, city state or eternity. I don't think that you and me are gonna ultimately flourish if our friendship is based on the joy we get at watching someone's downfall. I don't think that's the long-term healthy kind of relationships
Well,
that'll
again, that's
allow us
something we
to
can
flourish.
empirically show is false because lots and lots of relationships are based on that. Lots and lots of relationships are based on football teams and rivalries and watching the other team downfall. And that's why you're friends because you want the other team's
Mm-hmm.
downfall. And it's a slippery slope to say, well, because you feel this in one context, therefore you're going to feel it in every context. Like, no, that's
Well,
literally just not how
no,
emotions
you're
work.
making yourself the kind of, and I'm not trying to say
Well, there is no
don't do
kind there.
sports.
You can feel one emotion towards one thing and it won't necessarily spread to other things. Like I can step on an ant and feel nothing.
I don't think that's true, man.
It's literally like how I don't understand what that even means. Like we know for a fact
So
emotions
you
have
think you
boundaries.
so
Like you
you
feel love towards your family, you don't feel it towards literally anyone. You feel hate towards one person doesn't mean you
mm,
literally hate anyone. The
mm.
fact that you have an emotion where you can feel it in one context does not lead to the slippery slope where you're going to feel it in literally every potential context.
Well,
There are differences.
I mean, do you not think anything of the moral philosophers who have talked about character and habit and how character is just a accumulation of all these little tiny habits and choices we make day to day? It makes you more and more into this kind of person, and maybe you die without your relationships having to suffer this kind of self-destruction in this particular group. But do you not think there's something for this Aristotelian kind of through habit, through daily choices, making yourself a kind of person who
No,
just
because they haven't
naturally.
kept up with modern science and neurology and evolutionary psychology. They know nothing. They know literally nothing about modern science. So we know they're wrong. Like there's clearly some
That there's no such thing as building character through small decisions.
building character through small
Yeah,
decisions. Like that's
becoming a
so
kind of
vague.
a kind of person, say, who makes other people's interests their own, or finds competition and rejoices, takes glee when someone else gets harmed.
Those are super vague statements that don't really relate to because the original claim was if you feel joy towards the suffering of one person, then you could potentially feel joy for the suffering of someone you like or someone who's close
Yeah, you
by or
make
something.
yourself more into the kind of person who
Like
could do that.
that's wrong. So there's barriers there. Like we know that if you can feel joy from eating chocolate ice cream, does that mean you're going to feel joy from eating a brick? No, because they're different things. They're different
That's not the.
psychological things.
That's not a. No, that's not a right. I don't. I don't think that's the best analogy, Tom. I. You know. I mean, people. So just take an example of the crass business person. So they love their family,
They don't
but
have an in-group, so for them it's the same. So like if a person values all human beings equally and they feel joy from one person suffering, then yes, it's rational for them to conclude they would feel joy from anyone suffering. If you don't value all humans equally, then there's a difference there. You can value people who you don't value when you see them suffer, you can value that experience. But for someone you do value, you wouldn't feel that because there's a difference. It's like a brick versus a chocolate ice cream. Like
well, no,
there's a
you say
difference
you
there.
wouldn't feel that. Maybe not in the here and now, but Tom, but clearly it's true though that surely you've met such people that are that in some relationships, say in their work, they continue to relate to people in an abusive way, and over time they become less and less of a giving person at home. They become more and more a hardened person that it starts to pervade more and more all the relationships. I mean, surely we've seen this.
No, we
Surely
don't
we've
see
seen.
that. Like we
Really?
see the opposite of that. People's psychological states are
No, I'm
usually
sorry.
fixed from early childhood. Like the what
No, no,
happens is they have a tendency to pretend to be more amicable, but once they become in a stronger social position where they don't have to pretend, they stop pretending. But people are usually they don't become psychopaths or sociopaths. They start as psychopaths and sociopaths, and then once they become comfortable in their state, they become more open to expressing that psychopath or sociopathy. So we don't usually see people become more like that. What we see is they become they have less inhibitions about expressing the already innate feelings that they have. Like there's very little data that shows people become more sociopathic or psychopathic over time. It's mostly something that's
Well,
innate in themselves.
psychopathy is a particular thing about an ability to do emotional form the right kinds of moral emotions. But I'm not kind of talking about that. I'm just talking about, I don't know, what moral philosophers have always called character. But maybe you don't think that there's ways to change your character over time through kind of daily decisions.
Well, character is just neurology, it's neurological states. And so when we're talking about character, we're talking about those DS5 conditions like psychopathy and sociopathy. And what you're talking about is a specific kind of person who will um some like you're trying to make a connection between the fact that in business where they're very ruthless, therefore they become more ruthless in other things. That's a slippery slope fallacy. We know that does not happen. Um, we know that, like for example, people who are drone pilots,
You don't think that when someone makes a, well, okay, go ahead. Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you.
like
The
people who are
drum
drone
pilot.
pilots and they are killing people overseas and destroying their lives, they are they don't become desensitized to killing people. They still are very, very aware of killing people. It doesn't make them like, oh, it's okay to kill people. Like, no, The military isn't like, oh, I killed people overseas, therefore I'm just totally fine with killing people. Like, no, they have lasting mental damage from that far more often. So the fact that you're saying that because they do this action, it doesn't make them more comfortable with that action in all contexts. That's not how it works.
Yeah. So, some for violence, I think it sort of does, but granted, other people, you're quite right. I've known veterans that it makes them even more sensitive to like not wanting to, like, it wasn't a big deal before, and now it's like a bigger deal. It still is affecting their relationships, of course, but that's another thing. So okay, character. So maybe not character. What about the competitiveness you mentioned earlier? I just wonder if I could probe. Just kind of interested in your thoughts
Sure.
on. So I always have thought that competitiveness again works against perfected relationships, and so eventually I'm going to say that we need to be changed from all these things, but you may not think so. So I understand the fun and games of competitiveness, I honestly do, but how about this, Tom? The competitiveness where the people in your field, and it's always the people closest to you. Like if someone's doing really well in, I don't know, it's like a painter. I don't care, let them do well. But like someone who's doing the same kinds of career tasks or career path that you're taking, the same projects you're trying, and they're really successful, like they skyrocket or something like that. This kind of this, even if they're your friends, and this is what's so pernicious, even if they're your friends, this feeling that I've not really made their interests my own. Actually, I'm kind of secretly wishing they're not that they're get killed or something, but they're fail in some way, or at least not be that successful, because it just because I don't, this competitiveness. Do you kind of find that to be, again, something that just is antithetical to perfected kinds of loving relationships?
No, that's like why it's funny when I smash on the guy who's my opposing volleyball player. Like, it's because I have the desire to want to defeat him. I want him to fail, and they want him to fail because he's the best one on the team. And so when somebody who's worse than him, the underdog, smashes him down and beats him to the pulp, then everyone thinks it's the funniest thing ever because they already have that innate desire. That's why we like underdog stories, because we want the guy at the top to fail because we're competitive, and it's fun, and it's relationship building to have those kinds of things. And the guy at the top likes it when people want him to fail and he doesn't fail. So that's a huge relationship builder for both sides. And as long as it's not like 100% success or 100% failure, then that builds a very strong relationship because you have these ups and downs. And so if the guy at the top does occasionally fail and you find it absolutely hilarious, that builds connection with the people he's playing with and with the underdogs. And if he's successful most of the time, that builds that competitive relationship where the underdog wants to beat him.
Right.
And so this entire dynamic of having those competitive desires is a huge benefit to these kinds of relationships, which are some of the strongest that there are. Video game friends or competitive sports friends, Kobe versus Jordan or whatever. Like, these are some of the best friendships that there are, but they are very competitive at times, and even like yelling and punching each other at times, but they're still like the best friends.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of a little bit reminded of a couple kind of not my immediate family but extended family relatives that have passed on fairly recently, and they both, I think, could be characterized as saying they've got a million people who loved them, in terms of like they thought they were a great guy and they were kind of friends, but the immediate family members found them to be unlivable. Like they couldn't live with them, so they're estranged from like immediate children and their spouses. I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm not trying to say, like you just said, these are the best friendships. I'm not trying to say, oh, well, those are superficial friendships. I'm honestly not trying to say that. But at the same time, Tom, wouldn't you think that like in the truly deepening relationships, like where we're sharing a life together, like you and I are like best friends going through, the ups and downs and being there for each other in the crises moments, or being in a, family and you're married to someone and have children, the idea that like I'm competitive, like that I'm not embracing their well-being, that I can't celebrate their successes as my own, that's not destructive. I mean, it just seems to me in the really close relationships in life, and if we're going to have ever eternal, ever deepening relationships with everyone, they're all going to become like this. That kind of me being unhappy when someone else succeeds is really, really destructive. But
No, there's different
maybe you don't
people with
see
different
that.
values. Different people who have different relationships. So the fact that you have some people who only are really connect with in the competitive sense, and then they don't connect with people who have different needs and desires for more of the relational sense. So what? Like they are different people. And it's not like you get to choose which family members you have and which family members you don't. So they probably would have been happier in a family that was more competitive and would have probably made much better, closer relationships if their family was more competitive like they were. And the fact that some of your family members are less competitive and don't get along with that means, yes, you're going to split from them because you have different needs and desires for what you have well-being for. And you're going to connect with different human beings who more share those needs and desires. It's like Republicans and Democrats, or Packers fans and Minnesota fans, or like, yes, there are people in your family who have different values and connect with different people who aren't the same as your family. That's not a bad thing. It's just people have different values.
Well, they do, but I just wonder that the competitiveness, if you're able to really share any long-term, genuine, deep relationship of like, sharing a life together and all, like if you are unhappy when they do well at a certain level, like there's a certain level you're unhappy with that. It just seems to me that that's really, really destructive.
Well, again,
But
this seems like a slippery slope fallacy of you're saying I am
well,
happy any single time they suffer or fail. Like every
right.
time they suffer, that makes me happy. Like, well,
Right.
no, it's like I'm
So
only
I get
happy.
I
Take my volleyball example for a second. Like, I'm only happy if I smash on him in volleyball. I'm not happy like if I see somebody run him over in the streets. So the
right,
fact that I can feel joy towards his suffering in some context doesn't imply that I feel joy for his suffering in all
right.
contexts. And
So
so I can still have a meaningful relationship with him, even though I still feel this joy from his suffering in
right.
volleyball.
So couple things, a minor thing and a major thing. And the major thing is really something that I should have emphasized more at the beginning, because Tom, these are good. I mean, thank you for raising these. I need to bring you to like a moral philosophy conference, by the way. The minor point would be like, here's someone who doesn't think Schadenfreude is bad. Like, screw Schopenhauer and all those cats, and he thinks, and Aristotle about character and all like that. And we eschew all that kind of stuff as well. So I really
I'm
do need
down.
to
Give me a
I
plane
need
ticket.
to
I'll
I
be
need,
there.
I need to bring you along and see, like, well, these things that moral philosophers kind of take for granted, as it were. But anyway, the major, like, video game, that's great. You need to go to a moral philosophy conference and bring that up about like the wishing ill on your, like, friendship. Some like title of paper like friendship colon, the good of wishing ill on your bestie or something like that, and have
Yeah.
people look at the title and like, what is it? But anyway, so the major point would be that what I'm going to say, and this is like, if you don't believe in an afterlife and all this, then you might say, well, that was great in theory, but it's irrelevant. If there is an afterlife, and if there is eternity of ever deepening relationships, so that all our relationships, and Christianity is more kind of the image that they have of these perfected relationships, is that a marriage relationship is just a reflection of that. It's just one aspect of a much deeper kinds of relationships we can have with tons and tons of people in this kind of eternally ever deepening relationships where we're more and more known by the others, and the others more and more know us. That and we so my and I've got an argument in a book for this. Ultimately, our relationships are going to move in one extreme or the other. They're going to end up either where we make others' interests our own in genuine benevolence for all people, or they will end up in ones of acrimonious, like Mr. Potter at the end of A Wonderful Life, kind of. If you know that movie, it'll be like perfected relationships, or like completely self-destructive relationships. And I don't have time to, like, that's like a long chapter of a particular book, but that assumes like eternal, ever deepening relationships where God removes some of the contingencies of this life and allows our well-being to hinge on the state of our relationships with one another, with God and with one another. And you may not, like, that's a premise that I'm just working with, that I don't have time to defend, like, the Christian worldview here. And if you don't buy that premise, then that's cool. Like what you've said like holds, and like those are great arguments, and I'm not going to try to like say stuff like, no, you video gamers aren't happy, you just think you are. I'm not going to like do that. Like, I completely take your word for what's happening. And like
So just to clarify, like, let's grant there's a heaven. No, I think that's what the heaven is like is arbitrary, and so you could maximize any particular set of values and say, well, this is the value that'll get you into heaven, therefore it's the one that's perfect. But your argument that you said that it would either lead to perfect harmony or perfect disharmony in some sense seems false. Like, I think if there's a heaven and we live for eternally, we're going to eternally play basketball and video games, and we're going to have conflicts, and there's going to be Kardashians, and we're going to watch the conflict on YouTube, and those things are going to be just eternal.
Yeah,
I don't think there's going to like we're just going to be happy now. Like, no, people are going to choose conflicts. It's going to be more fun.
Right. Well, there could be conflict though the kind of conflict that I think that you're talking about within though relationships where I've genuinely made your interest my own. And see, that's kind of the point in deepening relationships. And this is what is so poignant about children and marriage and having parents who are aging. You get eventually an opportunities for things to bubble up and come to the surface. Have I really made their interests my own? These kinds of kind of issues where Schadenfreude, if there's a hint of it, it actually does undermine. There's a resentment there that was brewing and it didn't really come out, but now it's coming out. So
I sort of agree with that, but I don't think I'm going to make everyone else's interest my own. There are some people like my in-group who I may do that with. There's some people who do that with for no one and just have their own interests. And the people who I'm competing with, like in a video game, I'm not making any of their interests my own. I want to defeat them. I want to beat them on all cases, 100% of the time. And so it doesn't seem like this idea that all beings will either make all other beings' interest their own or no other beings' interest their own seems false. It's just a black and white fallacy. Like, no, there's going to be a spectrum. You're going to have in-groups, you're going to have out-groups, they're going to have conflict. There's some people who are going to be alone, some people are going to want to be purely altruistic, and there's going to be a diversity.
So, right. Well, perfected relationships, if resentment and things like that can never get a hold on it, then you've got to be not just not having antagonistic feelings toward your in-group, but you got to be psychologically incapable of that, or else at any time it's gonna bubble up.
So, like, if it bubbles up towards my out group, it still won't bubble up towards my in groups. There's no problem here. Like, the fact that I feel it for one person doesn't mean I will feel it for all people. There's no slippery slope.
But I would say for perfected relationship, you have to be the kind of a person, for instance, who forgives slights whenever they occur, who makes other people's interests your own whenever other person has an interest, or else there's always this danger, and it will crop out given enough circumstances. It will crop out where it really will harm the other person. The other person will be hurt, will be disillusioned, disappointed. This happens in ever deepening relationships. People 30 years, and it's like, well, I guess I never knew him. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, he was this kind of, but you get enough issues and something was there, some Schadenfreude, some competitiveness, some other kind of viciousness, it reared its head. I mean, it's like a danger that plagues, it's like under the surface, even if it's never, and I would just say in eternity, those things are going to eventually bubble up if they're not completely cured.
It's like,
really, why?
The fact that there are, like, if I met Hitler, I wouldn't like Hitler necessarily, and so I would not want to be friends with him. So I would put like a barrier to the Schadenfreude.
So I'm not.
It's hypothetical. You could pick any person you want. I don't know. But Mary Poppins. It doesn't matter. But say there's some person I don't like. The fact that I dislike Hitler because he mass murdered the Jews doesn't mean I'm going to dislike my friend Bob. Like, the fact, so I have this Schadenfreude for one person doesn't mean I'm going to have it for another person. There's some people I don't want to spend time with, and some people I do want to spend time with.
Totally hear that.
And the fact that I can potentially feel it for one person does not mean that there's this risk that I'm going to feel it for literally every person I ever meet.
So here's kind of one thing that I think I'd want to say, Tom. In any relationship over time you have with anybody, you and that other person are going to have a list of legitimate grievances. Sure. Like in a marriage over 50 years or whatever, you are. And so you're either going to be a person who, whenever offenses are done to you, forgives, doesn't hold resentment, is willing to make the other person's interest your own, despite the fact that they didn't do that at one time to you, that kind of thing. If you don't have a full-fledged character to be able to respond just like that all the time, then there's always going to be a potential for discord, for resentment, for these kinds of things. So you
I
need
just
certain virtues. What I would say is that thoroughgoing, like you would forgive an offense wherever it occurs. You would promote someone's interest wherever it's there, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm just like it seems like you're adding up all of the grievances without taking into account the fact that there's also fun things they do together which they enjoy. So if there's something you don't enjoy together, let's say it drops it to like -5, and then you go to a play together and really have fun and it drops it to like +5, it doesn't matter. There could be infinitely many negative things you hate about the other person. But as long as there's positive things you enjoy that balance it out, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant how many
I don't
things
know.
there are
I
that
think
you
it
have a
does
grievance you have.
matter. No, I think it
No,
does
no. This,
matter.
this is, I think, the fundamental mistake you're making is that you think that the negatives are additive, and the positives are additive, but they don't cancel each other out. Like that's just false. Like you can hate
Mm.
someone in some context, but love them in a different context. You can have things you don't like about someone, but things you do like about someone. Like in a relationship, that's most relationships are.
Yeah.
Here's some things I don't like about you,
Yeah.
but I really like these things about you, which is why I'm with you. And so there's this cancellation of where the positive things and the negative things add together, and as long as it's below some threshold, you won't abandon the person. And that's what most relationships are like. And so the fact that some relationships can go beyond that threshold doesn't mean that in every relationship necessarily will over time, because there are ups and downs, there are patterns. It can balance
Mm.
out. It can go positive infinitely, it can go negative infinitely. So there's lots of different variations there. The fact that you think that they will all necessarily tend towards negative doesn't make any sense, negative or positive.
Yeah, I think. Well, I think. Well, I mean, I can't. I do think they will ultimately either be perfected or they'll be ultimately self-destructive. I do that. Not in this life, not. But that's just. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have space to do that. I mean, it's chapter 7 of a particular book I could point you to, but I'm not going to ask you to read it. But it's kind of a long, extended argument of why I think that. But I would just say that that's not a perfected relationship, of course. If there's resentment under the surface about something, it's not a perfected relationship. And that's what, like, the kingdom of God for me is all about. Jesus is trying to create this kingdom of perfected relationships.
Right
But
now, I would say a perfected relationship is one that's in that range, going up and down and experiencing the positives and the negatives. And that's a perfected relationship. Perfected relationship isn't like 100% of the positive. I think that would be boring. No one would really want that. What you want is this kind of conflict and this up and down and this middle ground where there's happy experiences and unhappy experiences, where it's unexpected and you don't know what exactly is going to happen next, and you're under this challenge of trying to maintain the relationship. And sometimes it's successful, like the movie you mentioned. You don't want a movie that's just happy the whole way through. You want conflict resolution, and you just will go to a different movie with more conflict resolution. That's the perfected relationship. Matrix, perfected relationship. Kung Fu Panda, perfected relationship. Not perfect happiness.
right, yeah. Well, some of that unexpectedness and things like that, and surprise and all that, you could have when people perfectly make others' interest their own. You could have, but certainly you wouldn't have the up and downs of like resentment. Do I get over this? Do I? You wouldn't have that in a perfected relationship. So, in as much as you think that's part of a perfected relationship, I'm just going to disagree with you. But I totally get that. That's like, well, won't we be bored in heaven then in perfected relationships? And that actually is a subject that there have been articles and books written about. Like, why wouldn't you be bored in heaven, like in perfected relationships? Like, you just sitting around, what, just like singing love songs? I mean, it's just boring after a while. So I totally get that there's a potential issue there. I think that can be addressed, but I would say that resentment, things like that, wouldn't be part of perfected relationships, even though surprise and adventure and all that could very well be.
Well, I just disagree. I'd say that if you have resentment for someone and then you like get back together with them and you work it out, that's usually a more fulfilling relationship than one you never felt resentment for. So if we watch movies, the ones that include resentment but still have some kind of positive resolution are better than the ones that have no resentment.
I think the final state is, yeah. And of course that's what we're doing. If there is such a state of perfected relationships, we will have had to work through a lot of stuff.
But I'm saying then go back to resentment. So resentment,
So
resolution,
you
resentment,
so
resolution,
you
resentment, resolution.
yeah, I Well,
Like,
in those
the
moments,
movie doesn't become fun after you finish it at the resolution, and then you just want to stay at the resolution forever. You want a new movie with more resentment, and then get to another resolution. Resentment,
well,
resolution.
as long as there's going to be resolutions, right? You don't want the Ingmar
Yeah,
Bergman movies
that's
forever.
the perfect relationship. The perfect relationship is you have resentment, you go down, you get resolution, you have resentment, you go down, get resolution. It's ups and downs, like a video game. Challenge, conclusion, competitiveness, and then winning and losing. You want the ups and the
So it's
downs.
interesting.
That's the perfect relationship.
So your view of heaven, if there's a heaven, would be this kind of ups and downs where there is
Yeah.
some kind of like betrayal at points and some kind
Yes.
of like
Literally.
shenanigans, like that really hurt me, Tom. I mean, that was cruel,
Yes.
but we got over it. And
Yes. I mean, video games and anime nonstop.
so then my list of virtues would have to be things like forgiveness. It would have to be benevolence. It would be
Boring.
obedience, because someone has to coordinate all these people's well interests. It would be humility, to know that I cannot like attain these virtues on my own, and I cannot plot the course of how this is going to happen. I got to give my life in the hands of ones who's coordinating all this and giving me the power to overcome competitiveness and schadenfreude in ways I can't do myself. Those would be my virtues. I'm just kind of interested, would be the Christian virtues. So I'm interested kind of like what your virtues would be for a life of this up, like if that's the best life, the ideal life, the up and down, the virtues would be, I don't know, similar list or not so similar?
Freedom of choice would be like the ability.
That would be the virtue.
Involuntary imposition of will is moral. Voluntary assistance of will is moral. Involuntary imposition of will is immoral. So people get to choose for themselves the kinds of lives they want to experience. They'll have the ups and the downs, and they can change that over time, experience more ups and downs. They can just try stuff.
And you think things would work out if people just got to
work out? There would be ups and downs. So there would be working out and then not working out, and then working out and then not working out, then working out, then not working out. So it would be, as long as there are physical limitations on the amount of damage that you can cause, like if it's physically impossible to kill somebody, then yeah, eventually things are going to work out and not work out eternally. And it's going to continue going up and that up and down thing, and it's going to be like a video games forever. And if you want to take a break for 1 billion years and just chill in a forest, go for it.
Gotcha. So just to complete, and then we talk as much as you want about whatever you want, but just to complete the original misunderstanding about the objections about virtue, how good do you need to be to get to heaven? How much do you need to believe? Broadly, here's what I would usually tell people. I usually say, who will be in heaven? The people who want to be there will be in heaven. I mean, until 1500, the Christian tradition didn't know of this category of ignorance being a final factor in whether someone is fully and finally reconciled. And I firmly believe ignorance is in no way a fact. I think there's strong both biblical claims for that and just theological claims about why ignorance is not going to keep someone out of heaven, if you put it that way. So who will be in these perfected relationships? The people who want to be there. But I do know that you got to get, in my view, you got to get rid of the schadenfreude and the competitiveness and other stuff. Competitiveness, Tom, I'll just tell you, I'm better than I was. Like, I was super competitive growing up. I honestly think that I've gotten better. And I will say, by the grace of God, I believe that. Okay, schadenfreude, I'm still genuinely wrestling with. Like when political people, like certain ex-president or something, when I read a headline of like they might get something coming to them, like there's a glee. And it's not just that the truth is going to be exposed, which is good. It's not just that justice is maybe going to happen at some point, maybe, which is good. It's also, I don't like this cat. And the idea of him suffering brings me some joy. And I can't, for me, I mean, you might say good news is you don't have to get rid of that. But I mean, I can't seem to get rid, like it's there. And I can't, like I try, but that's like, my point is I'm an ongoing work, and I know I can't get there by myself. So this is why then Jesus becomes necessary for me. It's like somebody's going to help me do this in ways I can't seem to do it on my own, just through trying to pray for enemies and things like that. I can't, like I can't seem to get there. So that's kind of my short answer to why things like humility, things like making Jesus Lord are going to be necessary for me to live into these perfected relationships. But of course, I have a different view of perfected relationships than you do. And that's been one really interesting thing today, Tom, is that you've such an interesting picture of what you think perfected relationships are. I mean, I just think it was a really interesting picture that I kind of saw you painting. I don't share it, but I think it's really interesting to consider that. And I honestly appreciate hearing it. Is an interesting challenge.
Yeah, I think that freedom of choice and the desire or the ability to live or an experiment with life how you want is better than perfect lovingness of everyone. I think that's boring and irrelevant. I think to each their own. If some people want to do that, it's fine, but it's clearly not the objective standard because not everybody wants that. It would not maximize happiness or maximize well-being for everyone. It would maximize it for some people who want that, which is great. But an objectively better system would be one that maximizes what everybody wants, not just what this one particular group seems to like. And so I'd say, like, no, a better system would be let people choose for themselves what they want, and the people who want all lovingness can have all lovingness. The people who don't need it. That's a better system. Um,
So in perfect autonomous choice, that would be kind of like heaven for you.
Sort of. It'd be
It's
like
many
my
options.
world where you could like design your
Well,
own universe and then play your video games. And then if you want to go to the forest for a billion years, go to the forest. And if you want to like come back and do more video games, that's great. Enter another person's world if they accept it. That's great. Yeah, the freedom of choice thing where you can go try stuff is a better world than
so
obedience.
just really quick, and this isn't really a challenge to you or anything, and this is such a broad statement, you might say, that I just lumped together way too many things. But it is true that in terms of the number of choices people can make today, it's incredibly unprecedented. Choice about what to read, choice about what career to do and where to do it, where to live in the world. I mean, for most of human history, man, you grew up and you did the trade of your parents in this little local place, and there just wasn't a lot of choice. So if autonomy was really a key to happiness, and I'm not trying to be a big challenge, but this is just kind of my challenge to you, if I could put it. If autonomous decisions really were the key to a good life, this should be, it seems to me, like by far, like
The best humans have ever been
10,
and the happiest
100
humans
times,
have ever been.
yeah,
Yep, it
ever.
is. It
But the
is.
empirical evidence doesn't suggest that.
Well, it
Oh,
does.
do they?
It
Oh no,
does.
come on, Tom.
Like,
No,
so
happiness,
there's
like
two different
life satisfaction indexes about what.
significantly higher than when there was Black Plague. So yes, our
Well,
life
yeah,
index
when
of
there's a
happiness.
black
Wait.
plague.
So there's two different relevant studies here. One is that the choice study. So there's examples of where there's too many choices people have. It makes them more stressed because they don't know how to pick between the choices. But that's only because they have a limited time to do it. They have infinite amount of time to do it. They don't have the same stress of picking choices. And so the fact that they have a life expectancy of X number of years and they only have a certain amount of time to pick the choices to get the job done adds stress because there's more choices, but the amount of choices is greater than that of the limited time you have to make a choice, and that causes stress. If we just had infinite amount of time, that wouldn't be that'd be fine to have infinite number of choices. And there's the fact of the studies of happiness. Yes, happiness today is greater than it's ever been in human history. Humans are better off than they've ever been. There's a great book on it from Steven Pinker, Better Angels of Our Natures. So yeah, we're a lot happier now than we've ever been in human history. There are some consequences to that, where because we have more time to explore life and we're not dying at a young age, the people who aren't as successful at like relationships or whatever end up living to be older or live longer, and so their happiness is still being measured, whereas before they'd be dead, and so their happiness wouldn't be measured. But overall, the amount of happiness aggregate to the total is still higher. And there's what is called survivor bias, where the fact that the unhappy people can live longer, their numbers are also now accumulated into the data, where before it wasn't because they were dead. And so if we incorporate those data into the past data, yeah, there would be a lot more misery. So we'd have to like count dead people, suicide rates, death rates as unhappy people. And if we put that data into past history, yes, most people were dying. So they're a lot less happy than the people today who are not dying. They're not as happy because they still have depression and stuff, but they're significantly more happy than if they were dead, presumably.
So a lot of things about healthcare and things like that certainly have hugely improved kind of happiness. That I can get my toothache fixed and I can all this kind of thing. But I guess I'm thinking of the studies about people's sense of belonging. like in this age of just autonomy and choice, the lack of the feeling that I'm belonging, that I'm known and loved as much, the more kind of like feelings of being isolated. But like I know of Pinker and all, but anyway, I just kind of raised that. But maybe you just dispute that. And if you want to say that people are just a lot happier than they've ever been, okay, okay.
Well, there are challenges like belonging, but belonging doesn't make you more miserable than people were in the past. Like the fact that there are definitely some differences in our culture today than there was in the past, and there are some ways in which people could have been happier in cultures in the past, doesn't mean that the aggregate sum is less than it was. Like the aggregate is still better today than it was in the past, even though there are definitely some differences in some ways that it could be worse.
Okay. Do you think your view of well-being has changed? Just kind of curious about like in the course of your life, and you don't have to tell me how old you are. I don't need to know or anything, but just in the course of your life, like from when you're a teenager to now, about like what makes for happiness, what makes, or I should say happiness, what makes for a good life as we experience it. Just curious if you think it's changed much.
Um, um, I guess there's multiple ways to answer that. Like one is my personal emotional desires and what makes me happy, and the answer is no. It's been the same thing. And then there's the model of happiness and what I understand happiness to be fundamentally for everybody. And yes, that's changed with my understanding of philosophy and moral theory. And as I've learned more, I've tried to make that more accurate. But what subjectively makes me happy, no, it's the same.
Okay. Just curious, and I'm not going to play that I'm older than you. You know, you'll think differently when you're older. That's not. I'm just would just say for me, it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot from when in the last however many years since I was a teenager. Just kind of curious. Just kind of curious. Again, that's
I
not
have
meant to be me a bit like I'm older and wiser. I'm honestly not trying to say that. I'm just curious if it's changed.
But I have autism, so I have a special interest, and that special interest is the most
All right,
important thing in the world to me. So it's not likely, unless the special interest changes, that's not going to change. It's like I need my special
gotcha.
interest.
I didn't know that. So that you put a lot of thought and research into this one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I had major depression for most of my life, so I had to figure out like what is it that I need to be happy.
Well,
And
yeah, so I'm not trying to get too personal, and you don't have to answer anything. But what kind of, if you came out of depression, what for you? I'm just really curious. What for you was? Would you attribute that? If you could attribute to one or two things, I'm just curious to what you would attribute that to.
sex with models, 100%.
Okay,
So I had suicidal major depression, and then I had two different girls who I dated who were incredibly attractive, and then I didn't have depression anymore. It was that simple.
really?
Yep. If I'm in a relationship with a very attractive woman, I'm happy, and if I'm not happy.
Is that just the enjoyment of being with them, or is it the kind of the more
No.
reflection on the way you think about yourself?
Well, the way I think about myself is irrelevant. It's more of like internally how I feel. And so when I'm in a relationship, not just like specifically with them, but when I have a relationship, have someone who I can see or call or go out with or whatever, um, I feel more at peace. And it's not the way I think about myself doesn't affect that. It's that which causes the way I feel or way I think about myself. So for autism, it's not like I have trains, therefore I have self-worth. It's no, I have trains, and because of the way my brain works, that makes me happy. And so for autism, there's no introspective thinking about yourself that has no effect on it whatsoever. It's you
Right.
have the thing in your life that you care about or you don't. And because of how your brain works, you're either happy or you're not because of that. And there's no words mean anything. Words are completely irrelevant. Thoughts are completely irrelevant. You either have the thing or you don't. It's black and white.
Would you I mean, and there's nothing magical about this word, but would you be comfortable characterizing that romantic relationship as a kind of connecting that has a certain overlap with other relationships in which you connect with others? Kind of this idea of sharing a well-being, becoming a we self of a kind, where you share, being known and loved by the other person, or do you kind of think that's a completely different kind of relationship than my relationship with my gaming friends or other kinds of friends?
Well, I would say like I don't have a relationship with other people. Like all of the other things are superficial for me. I do them because I have to, not because I want to. So like friends for me, family. Like, they're not people I want to spend time with. I'd rather play video games, watch anime, and just never speak to any of them. But I have to function in the world. And so my relationships with women is more like, this is what I actually care about. This is the relationship that matters to me. Everyone else is just superficial. I'm doing this as a job to function, and that's it.
Gotcha. And do you think that that's an ideal relationship, like with girlfriends, or do you think that part of that is like it's a pointer to kind of like a perfected relationship? If that question even makes sense. So I'm just thinking of people like C.S.
So-
Lewis. C.S. Lewis would say something like, well, all these relationships are like, there's parts of them, there's aspects that are a part of a kind of a perfected relationship. He's going to say with God and others, in this godly kind of coordinated community. But I guess I just wondering, does that at all ring true as a possibility, or does that just seem so incredibly ridiculous to you that could be like a part of a larger kind of perfected relationship that we're all longing for, to use C.S. Lewis's terminology?
Well, unless God looks like an 18 to 25-year-old supermodel, then I don't think so. So it'd be very strange for that
Okay.
kind of relationship to look like some kind of perfected relationship. It doesn't quite make sense to me to think of it that way.
Sure. I totally get that. Okay. Just curious. Interesting, Tom. Really interesting.
All right. Well, we have been going for about an hour and a half. I'm getting hungry, so I'm gonna get some food. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation. Do you want to give any links or references where people can find more about your work?
No, well, that article about the fate of the good person was in this book here about a new theist response to the new atheists. Just really quickly, I've got a book on divine wrath, and then my latest one was on the nature of desert claims. If anyone's interested in desert as a category, I'd be just interested if anyone wants to email me to talk about desert. Well, yeah, no, more like deserving things. Although the dessert pudding thing is a great idea, and I could write a book on that. It'd be probably good research. But like what it is to deserve something. But just finally, I've got a manuscript on moral intuitions, what they are, and what normative properties they're tracking. And I'm just looking for sometimes people to engage. If anyone is interested in this subject of moral intuitions and wants to talk about it, or would like to read a section of it and just give feedback, that would be great. I just kind of am making that plug now, wherever, just because I'm looking for people to read and engage on moral intuitions. So thanks for that.
Yep. Thanks. Great talking to you, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, Tom. Bless you, man.